Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Mind Muscle Connection podcast. Today I have a very special guest, Adam Neth. He is a online and in-person coach located in Ohio. As we were talking off air, he's told me he's got 14 plus years experience here doing this stuff. So super excited to have him on and have a few awesome topics that we're going to chat about. So Adam, welcome to the podcast, man.
Thank you so much for having me on, Jeff.
Yeah, looking forward to chatting with you. We kind of have definitely the same interest in terms of hypertrophy and stuff like that. So we'll definitely dive into that. But before we talk about that, what are, whenever I have a new guest, I just kind of like to ask just a brief background, maybe how you got into this stuff and, what maybe led you down to this path to where you're at today.
Yeah, so I've been involved in athletics ever since I was really, really young, football, track, baseball, soccer. So really got into training just for the sports performance aspect, probably around the age 11, 12. Started taking it a little bit more seriously around 14, and then ended up just falling in love more with the training aspect and building muscle rather than the actual sports that I was training for. And then I ended up going to college at Capital University for exercise science. Then ended up switching to Wright State, still exercise science, but ended up competing in a natural bodybuilding competition in 2014 and started being an in-person trainer as well. Graduated in 2015 and with my bachelor's in sports science and started personal training down in the Cincinnati area. So I was a full-time in-person trainer for about 5.5 years. And then when COVID hit, decided to pivot. And that's when I started my garage gym and the hybrid approach of online and in person. So
Cool. And when you say you kind of have a hybrid approach, does that mean you have like you yourself as hybrid where, we kind of talk about this off air, but you're just online and in person, or do you have like some clients where you like kind of do both as well too?
So I have just my online clients, then I have just my in-person clients, and then a few of them are like hybrid. I'll program for them and then they'll come in maybe once a month for review.
Awesome. I guess, you kind of said that COVID started and we talked about your home gym. You know, have you found some benefits of being able to train, clients in your house and stuff like that in the garage and stuff? I guess, yeah, what kind of been your experiences there with that?
Yeah, when I first got into in-person training, it's that split shift where
Yep.
you're in the gym super early and then you have dead space in the middle of the day and then you got to come back. You're in usually pretty late. So I was fortunate that when I was down in Cincinnati, I actually worked like just a block away from where I lived. So I could just walk to the gym and train people. And I will say, like, if I did not live that close to the gym, I probably would have burnt out and
Yep.
stopped being an in-person trainer. So that's one huge benefit of training from the house is that there's no commute. And if I have a client at 6 a.m. and a client at, let's say, 6 p.m., it's not too much of a pain. So
Awesome. Yeah, that when I first started training too, I was doing the split shift in person, and man, that was rough. Like you said, I think that's where a lot of people end up getting burnt out. But luckily, you were able to build the home gym. Do you find that, I guess for you too, it's nice to be able to kind of train when you want, or do you kind of still have to work around your client's schedule at that point, or
yeah, I still have to definitely work around my clients'
yeah,
schedules. You know, Still generally morning sessions and evening sessions. So I usually work out around like 12, 1 o'clock. Now, one downside of having the gym at the home is that separation of work and relaxation.
yep.
Anytime that I'm home, come into my office, it's just like the work mode gets turned on, and it's kind of hard to turn it off at times.
Yeah.
I'm sure you.
Yeah, like I was telling you off air, I saw your home gym, which if anybody's listening and you haven't seen Adam's home gym yet, make sure you give him a follow and go check it out. It's really, really cool gym. He's got, a ton of great equipment in there, which we're gonna hit on here at some point. But I saw yours and that kind of sparked my interest in and I've seen like Brian Borstein's and Jordan's and like just kind of sparked my interest in getting, doing the same type of thing. But my biggest concern is like it's going to be nice to be able to not have to go drive, 20, 30 minutes to get to the gym and get back and whatnot. But it's like, okay, so now I work from home, then I'm going to be working out from home. It's like, how do you kind of find that, happy medium there with it and make sure you're not just only at home all the time? And so that was kind of the big thing there that I was thinking about.
Yeah, yeah, it does become like all of your days blur together if you don't leave the house, which happens to me for sure.
Yeah.
But I do have a gym membership about 10 minutes away. I'll try to go there once a week if my schedule permits, just to get out of the house.
Yep.
It's training by yourself and your garage gym is fantastic at times, but when the motivation's not there, it is kind of nice to have other people around. So
Yeah, there's that, again, that fine line there with it where it's like, it's nice to have your own stuff. You don't have to wait, but then, sometimes it is motivating to go and kind of train around other people. So like I said, it hasn't come out yet, but by the time this podcast comes out, me and Jordan, we kind of did a deep dive into like exercise equipment for like at-home training and stuff like that. But in what the kind of the conclusion we came to, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this, was, like one of the main things being like the leg training is going to end up being the thing that's probably the toughest, like especially like quad training in terms of like equipment that you need for that. Was that kind of your experience, or was there any equipment that you've, or any like kind of muscle groups or anything that you find is a little bit tougher to train like at home and with your own equipment, where again, you kind of have a limitation in terms of budget, and then obviously like just space as well too, right? You don't have, a massive gym to be able to put all kinds of equipment in. So I'm curious to hear kind of how that process was for you and whatnot.
yeah, I'm a little partial to like squatting patterns just because my quads are absolute shit. So, having like a hacks or a pendulum squat and the Cybex squat press was a definite for me. But yeah, I would say like the leg stuff is definitely the limitations. Like, I had to get a dual leg extension, hamstring curl. And then, I would like to have something like a lying hamstring curl to hit the short position for the hamstrings. But, that's just something I'm just going to have to work around. And then, I recently just got a Nautilus hip extension, like a 45-degree hip extension. And, I was looking for something that would be like relatively space saving. And that thing is just absolutely massive. I mean, it's the same footprint as like a hack squat. So that's the downside of having a garage gym is definitely the leg equipment. But I generally just went and like picked just basic movement patterns. So I have like a chest press, I have a row, a squat press, pendulum squat, a couple other things that I'm looking for. But yeah, I'd say the lower body stuff.
Well, I think the biggest limitation with it is it's for a home gym. Like you want to kind of find that you want to get something that's going to be like helpful, but also you can like, you can utilize it for many different things, right? That's why I know you have that functional trainer, man, you could just do so many freaking different things on that makes that like a really valuable piece of equipment for a home gym, right? Same thing with like barbell, dumbbells, things like that. You get a lot of bang for your buck. But then like something like a leg machine, it's like, it's just so it takes up a lot of space, but it's just, it's only one thing that you can really do with it, right? So I think that's kind of the downside of that. What was kind of like the main, I guess when you were starting out, what was like the top pieces that you got right away that you were like, I have to get this? And then what is kind of on the horizon for you in terms of like potentially new pieces of equipment that you are looking for? If you are, maybe you've already completed the gym and it's what you want, but it sounds like, there might be a few things there that you want to add to it.
So I will first say, if you are anybody out there looking for equipment, definitely check Facebook Marketplace. That is the way to go. You can find some just incredible deals on there. The number one piece of equipment that I told myself I have to have was the Prime Prodigy rack.
Yep.
Just because of the space saving. I mean, being able to have a lat pull down, a rack you can do squats in, having a cable crossover. That was a non-negotiable for me. And then let's see. That was pretty much the non-negotiable. The dual leg extension hamstring curl, got super lucky finding that. You know, that's something that it's hard to come by, hard to find those. But what I'm going to be getting next will be a dual. Of course, the dual things are the way to go in the space saving gym building out thing. So the adductor machine and the AB ductor, I'm going to probably look for either a Body Masters one or a Nautilus. So those are pretty hard to find. Actually did find one a couple of weeks ago, but then the shipping aspect, you know, it's all backed up. So
Yeah, cool. So it's again that prime one. That's like I said, that's the one that's I feel like can give you the most bang for your buck. You're just going to be able to do so many different things for that. Is there certain things that you need to still add to it? Like I was kind of looking at it, and it's like I know some people have like the pull up aspect of. Is that something that comes with it, or you do need to add a little bit more to like kind of the basic model there?
yeah, you get like the basic model, and then you can add on, like you see the rotate handle pull up bar thing. I think that was like an extra $200 or something like that. And I think it comes with just a regular pull up bar, but the regular pull up bar is like one of those fat grips.
Yep.
So I was like, yeah, I'm not using that for pull ups.
Yep. Yeah, it's kind of the prime handles there that it comes with for the pull-ups, right? And that allows you to kind of move around, which is super nice.
Yeah.
Any other like tips or anything like that you would say to look out for if you are kind of looking at getting a home gym or kind of getting your own? Any like maybe tips or any struggles that you went through specifically?
I would say definitely map it out. You know, if you have like an app that you can do, like my space is like 24 by 29. So I just got some graph paper and just marked it out that way. And then definitely measure or get measurements of the equipment that you're looking at so that you can organize it appropriately. And then that way you don't have this game plan that just gets blown off course.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I could see the measurements, and then that's really cool that you can like graph it out. As you said, there's an app for that you can get to be able to do that.
Yeah. Yep.
Cool. I have
I
to.
don't know which one it was that I used. It was like Magic Maker or something along those lines. But even just getting like graph paper and just saying like, you know, one graph is or one square is 1 foot or something
Right.
like that. And then comparing and contrasting pieces of equipment. So I have a hammer strength incline press, and I have a Magnum chest press as well. The Magnum chest press is like almost twice the size of the hammer strength press. So just some things to take into account, into consideration. So, you know, like if you're getting a chest press, maybe getting a chest press that's like an upright chest press where you just sit in it rather than lay down in it. So some things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's super helpful. That first one you mentioned, not the hammer strength one, is that like a cable one, or is that again a plate loaded machine that you have, the chest press one?
The Magnum chest press.
Yep,
Yeah, that's a plate loaded.
plate loaded.
But
Gotcha.
the nice thing is that it does converge, you
Right.
know, so you get that converging aspect, which you don't get on the hammer strength. And this, if you know anybody's listening that has a garage gym, this is the problem you'll run into. You know, you get a piece of equipment and you think you're going to get rid of one, and then you don't want to get rid of the other one because it has an aspect that the other one doesn't have.
it's I think I've brought this up a few times. It's almost like getting a tattoo, right? You get one and then it's like now you just want to keep adding more and more to it, and it's kind of addicting to just keep adding to it.
Yep. Yep.
Cool. Again, I'm sure we'll kind of circle back to that, but so yeah, let's kind of chat about your current training and nutrition. Is there anything? I know that like we talked about, you're big into hypertrophy. That's kind of your main thing there. But what do you have any goals right now that you're working towards? And yeah, kind of what just a general idea, kind of what your training looks like at the moment.
Yeah. So I told you I competed in 2014 in a natural bodybuilding competition, and I'm possibly looking to do that near the end of 2023 or early 2024.
Awesome.
So I had finished up a short mini cut. I got down to like 175, and now I transitioned into gaining. So currently, I'm probably going to be gaining for the next 6 to 9 months, I foresee. Um, and my split right now is very different than what I have done in the past. I've always trained like 5, 6 times a week. Um, but I feel as if, due to the extra stressors from starting a business, and training in person and carrying weights, etc., my recoverability is just much lower, and unfortunately I'm getting older. So I'm only training 3 times a week right now. And my training pretty much just looks like Tuesdays leg day, Thursdays push day, and then Saturdays pull day with a little bit of hamstrings. But I know we talked off air about some of the different systems that I've done. So the last few years, I've been very much into like the N1 periodization.
Mm-hmm.
And just recently, I'd probably say in the last 6 months, I have just stuck with the same exact split. I haven't changed really anything at all. And I just pretty much go to failure on every set now. So just super low volume training, and that's just tends to be what fits me right now.
Yeah, no, that's super interesting. And so, for anybody listening, like, I'm assuming the reason you're able to go to failure on pretty much everything, because somebody hears that and they're like, wait, so that's, kind of the way to go. But for you, since you kind of dropped your volume, it sounds like overall you're able to kind of push yourself to failure a little bit more. With that. And so I guess has that been a little bit more, have you found like any difference in terms of like results? I mean, obviously you're more advanced now at this point, so it's not, you're not going to notice these gains as much as you did in the past, but have you noticed kind of I guess, what have been the main differences there with like that kind of approach to it rather than what you've done in the past?
Yeah, kind of in the past, I will say when I first started training, it was more for sports performance. And of course, being a beginner, you can do anything and grow. So I ended up growing fairly well. And then when I had transitioned into college, I was doing like Lane Norton's FAT program, if you're familiar with the power hypertrophy adaptive training. And I did that for like 5, 6 years, just the same exact split, did not change a thing. And I had great results. Now, I did definitely accrue a lot of injuries doing that, probably because I didn't know what a deload was. I had no clue about RIR. This wasn't being talked about really a whole lot during those times. And then I got into like the Renaissance periodization stuff, where it was like a 4-to-1 paradigm. You're always doing 4-to-1 paradigms, 5-to-1 paradigms. You're accumulating volume. So, really high volumes back in like 2015, 2016. And then got into the N1 stuff and did like the N1 programming course online. And some of those, you change the stimulus, depending on the stimulus, maybe every 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks. So I was always under the impression of just having like a little bit of some novelty essentially at every program. Maybe you do something like, I'm sure you're familiar with the N1 terminology, like systemic programming to oxidative stress programming, to mechanotransduction programming to an AMPK. So going from like one meso to another meso, I would kind of manipulate some things like the tempo, exercise selection here and there. So these last 6 months, I have not changed a single thing. No change in tempo, no change in rep ranges, no change in exercise selection. And I will say that it gets very boring. That's one aspect of it. It's monotonous. It's just hammering the same nail constantly. But I will say that I do feel as if I have regained some lost tissue. And I feel as if I'm just a little bit more confident with my movements, just because there's not anything changing. And I think that was like half of my battle, is just making sure that everything stays the same, so that I do build those the coordination, the neuromuscular adaptations as well. So I do think there is something to be said about training with the same exact program for long periods of time.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think the more that I learned about it, it's like, yeah, I mean, that is important, to not be changing things up all the time. So I guess you said, things are fairly similar for you. Is this movements as well too? Like you're keeping the movements pretty much the exact same as well during this period of time?
Yeah. Yep.
So I'm curious to kind of hear your thoughts on this, because this is again something that I'm not sure if you saw, but Jordan Lips had a post on, like, he did like the same movements for like a long period of time. And this was really interesting. One of his kind of takeaways was like there were certain exercises that eventually just got like very monotonous for him. So I'm kind of curious to hear, are there any in particular that you can kind of pinpoint to that are like, this type of movement's one that does seem to get a little bit more monotonous than others?
Yeah, I would say, and not only monotonous, but also daunting.
Yeah.
When you're training to failure or very close to failure on, something like a pendulum squat,
Yeah.
split squats, like it's just not fun. So I would say like the daunting aspect is more of a challenging piece of the puzzle than the monotonous for me.
Yeah. I could see that. And especially something like a pendulum squat. I'm not sure what I think I saw, do you have an Atlantis pendulum?
Yes.
I don't know if you ever used the Arsenal one, but man, that one's freaking just, it's just the worst thing in the world. But I know any pendulum squat is that way. So, but I could see that where like you do it, it becomes a little bit more daunting than necessarily monotonous, which, you do need to take that into consideration as well too.
Yes.
How long do you think you'll end up kind of running this where it's the same movements and whatnot?
I honestly foresee just doing this until the end of the bulking, unless something needs to change. Like what was it? I'm doing like a high incline dumbbell press as well. Felt a little bit of some tweakiness in my pec, so that might warrant a exercise variation in the next couple of weeks. We'll see. But yeah, I think just having something to manage and then just managing those variables as best as I can, then I know exactly what's producing those results. I know if I change one thing that, okay, well, this feels, my knee feels a little bit off and I had changed this exercise. So I think just kind of having less variables floating around to know exactly what is producing the results that I want. And then also I think, like, to your point, like the having some novelty keeps people also engaged in training hard. So the novelty aspect, train, like if somebody's doing 4-to-1 paradigm, 5-to-1 paradigm, 6-to-1 paradigm, whatever, when they go into the next phase, then maybe changing something for the novelty aspect that is maybe less coordination based. So maybe you change the way you do your lateral raises. You go from a dumbbell to a cable, or you change a curl variation or something along those lines versus changing your main squat pattern.
Yeah. So like kind of, I think what you're kind of saying there is like, basically, if you are going to make kind of these changes, try to make like as small change as possible from like what movement you are doing, right? Like,
Yeah.
like you wouldn't, I don't know, maybe, I don't know if this is kind of, but like a back squat to then like a like pendulum. I mean, again, same kind of movement, but I feel like that's pretty different. Or like maybe changing a squat pattern to like a lunge or something like that. I'm assuming that's probably a little bit more on the lines of what you're talking about there with that.
Yeah. Because then you're just going to have to spend so much time relearning that movement before it actually becomes effective for building muscle.
Yep. And you see that all the time, right? People are just week to week changing up what they're doing, right? Just going in, oh, hey, I'm training legs today. What are some good leg exercises? I'm going to do this. And then you just end up never being able to actually like progress that movement, right? You spend more time, like you said, just learning how to do it. And I think that's where you can get yourself, again, like I said, there's that fine line of like, you want to keep, for certain people, and I think knowing your client and yourself, you want to keep a little bit of novelty in there for them, but it's like, hey, we're also trying to see results here. So let's, kind of find that fine line with it. So what are some other like kind of signs that you would potentially be like, okay, now I need to, change this movement up from what I'm currently doing?
Um, I guess like, having any kind of tweak, having any type of aches and pains, things become super monotonous. Um, if you go into the very specific types of stimulus programming, like the N1 suggests, then you could select exercises that might be more appropriate for that given stimulus. So maybe if you're doing a seated hamstring curl in one program, and then you go to a program that maybe you're wanting to go more into the metabolic realm of things, maybe it could be a good idea to do the lying hamstring curl to provide that shortened position, since the shortened position is more metabolically demanding. But what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I was going to ask you about this one in particular. I think the aches and pains are a big one, right? I think
Yeah.
that's super important. I was curious to hear like performance, like what are you kind of looking at there with that? Is that something too that you're looking at in terms of like, hey, are you, progressing? What would kind of warrant you to be like, okay, now I am at a plateau here with this lift? Because I do think that at a certain point you are probably going to run into things slowing down a little bit. So I'm just curious to hear kind of what you look into there with that.
Yeah, so I would either run a deload or a devolume and then go right back to that movement.
Okay.
And then if you don't see progress within the next block of training, then maybe it would warrant a transition to something else. But there's tons of different ways you could go about doing that.
Yep.
Let's just say like my hammer strength incline press stalls out, and then I accumulate tons of fatigue. Okay, let's go ahead, deload or devolume, and then go back to it, try and progress that for the next couple of weeks. And let's just say it doesn't progress. Maybe what I do is I just don't train to failure on that movement. Maybe I just pull back a little bit. Maybe I'm pushing just a little bit too far past my current recoverability. And then if I need to change the movement from there.
So it sounds like it's something that it's not going to be just like, oh, hey, I haven't progressed in, one mesocycle on it. All right, time to switch it out. It's going to be something that you're going to, mess around with a little bit more and give it a little bit more time to see if you're going to switch that exercise out for something else.
Yep. And again, this is something that I've changed my opinion on in the last year. Maybe a year and a half ago, if you would have asked me this, I probably would have just been like, yeah, change it. So
was there anything either, is it just like from like your kind of end of one experience, or was it more like what you've seen like in research or working with like clients as well too, or maybe a combination of all those that kind of change your mind on that?
Really just my own personal experience. I feel like I'm pretty attentive to what is happening.
Yeah.
Now you can only take anecdotes with a grain of salt, but if I'm working with clients and I'm working with somebody who's, not trying to maximize hypertrophy, not trying to be like a natural bodybuilder or anything like that, and they're like, hey, this is stale, or I'd rather do this other movement, for sure, let's do it.
Yeah.
I don't want to create those boundaries for people who are just trying to improve their health.
Yeah. So you're, something that you would do for yourself where you're trying to obviously really maximize muscle growth. It's going to be a little bit different than, that kind of gym pop client you have come in that, they just want to look a little bit better. And with that, you would probably be a little bit more likely to kind of switch that up a little bit in terms of the exercise and be not wait so long to make that change like you would in your programming.
Yeah. Cause that might, you might lose a client doing that, being like, hey, you have to do this, so.
I've been there before, right? Made that mistake early on as well too, right? It's like, oh, hey, this is what they say is the best way to do it, so we have to do it this way, right? And it's like that. You learn along the way though that's not always the right way to go about it. You got to take the client into account as well too. As far as progressions go for you, what are you kind of looking at there with that? Is it are you more like you like rep increases, volume increases, weight increases, all of the above? Is it just dependent? I'm curious to hear kind of how you progress there with that.
Well, I used to do like the progressions of RIR across a meso.
Yeah.
And I generally still have the majority of my clients do that. Maybe they start off at like a 3 to 2 RIR, and then they work all the way up to a 0. It's very dependent upon the individual, but For myself, I would have to say that it's very auto regulated. Some days I go in and I warm up on the pendulum. I'm like, hell yeah, things feel really, really good. Last week I took 200 pounds for 7. This week I feel so good. I'm gonna go 210, and maybe I take it for 8. Maybe I have this double progression. And then of course, how that goes. The next time you come in, maybe I'm at 210 and I get maybe even 2 less reps. Maybe I get like 5. So I used to be that person that would just absolutely force progressions constantly. And I would end up getting injured. So I've had a plethora of injuries over the years. And so I do definitely auto regulate my training. But if I have like certain rep ranges, like let's say my pendulum squat's like a 5 to 9 rep range, and I hit that 9th rep with 210, then I'm going to go ahead and make that load increase the next session. But yeah, I mean, I really just, I've been so, I've been so much into this stuff that I've like overthought to the degree where it like hinders my actual like workouts. So I will actually just go in, and as long as I'm training, 0 to 1 rep in reserve to muscular failure, then wherever that happens to land for that day, I'm totally fine with that. As long as I am seeing some trend lines where things are progressing over the course, then I'm happy.
So it sounds like it's not necessarily this like session to session, week to week kind of progression there with it. You are gonna, like, obviously you want to see that, but at the end of the day, it's more so what are these like kind of longer term trends going in terms of your performance. And so, but within that, you are kind of auto regulating, and you might have one week, like you said, where you're a little bit performance was higher, the next week it's a little bit lower, but then maybe it goes up as you as the mesocycle goes on. And again, over time, you're just looking that you are increasing or progressing in some way.
Yep. And sometimes, progressions happen and where I don't even add load. I match the same reps. Things, maybe I have a better pause at the bottom. Maybe I just feel more confident with the movement. Maybe the bar speed's a little bit faster. So yeah.
I would say that's, very similar to like, looking at like scale weight for clients, where it's like, it's not, you go into it thinking it's just going to be this very like linear downward process. But when you kind of zoom in, it's up and down. But again, we're kind of looking more at your trends rather than that, like that session to session, like progression. Cause I do think that, people start to hear progressive overload and then they take that too far. And then ends up being, like you said, forcing progressions, technique breaks down. And then you end up, not even stressing the muscle, you're stressing your joints more, leads to injuries, burnout, and all those things above. And so,
yeah,
go ahead.
I was super guilty of doing that. And that was just primarily from just being slightly uneducated and just taking the progressive overload to heart.
What's your opinion on like, kind of adding training, like adding volume throughout mesocycles? I know you said you focus on like seeing RIR trend down and whatnot as the mesocycle goes on, but do you find that you increase volume as the mesocycle goes on or anything like that?
I used to do this heavily.
Yeah.
I got into the Renaissance periodization stuff back in like 2015, 16. And their recommendations for sets per week was crazy. I mean, I was doing like 5 sets of deadlifts and then back off with like 4 sets of like straight legged deadlifts and then do like 4 sets of back squats. It was absolutely crazy. And then, maybe it was like 2018, 2019, they kind of refined some of their sets per week and brought them down lower. Now I will say I typically don't progress volume across the block unless one of my clients say that like maybe they're not getting a good enough stimulus with the current amount of volume. But of course, we would look at other factors before that, like their technique, what exercise they're doing, and some stuff like that. But yeah, generally I do not do that. I dug myself into some big holes of fatigue by doing that. because I'd get to that fourth, fifth week and get into that overreaching. And then I would deload. And every time that I would deload, I would get sick. I would get sick, and I started to notice this trend. And then on top of that, now it's like, okay, well, if you did 12 sets of hamstrings on your first week and you worked up to 18 sets, it's like, where do your sets really need to be? It's like this moving point. It's hard to manage those variables.
Well, I think it goes back to, when you see those sets kind of really go up. And again, I was definitely guilty of that too, with just like ramping up sets for clients. You see, I feel like workout quality tends to go down. It's like the quality of each set goes down because you just have so much more to do. And to go back to what you said earlier about the monotony, or the kind of the, not necessarily the monotony of it, but the daunting aspect of it, right? It's like doing those extra sets can be a little bit daunting because it's like, oh man, I got to do this, 2 or 3 more times. And I feel like that's another aspect of it too, that you need to take into consideration there with that.
Yeah. Because you would start like week 1 and you might have like 10 working sets at 3 reps in reserve. And then you get to week 4 and you're like, I have 22 sets to do at 0 RAR. Like, it's going to take me 2.5 hours.
So for you with three workouts per week, have you noticed kind of like the progressions? I'm sure recovery is probably better too, but progressions, has that kind of ramped up as well too, dropping down to 3?
I would say in the beginning of it was rather fast, and now that I've been doing it for a couple months, it's definitely slowed down. I have to definitely earn those progressions. But I will say, I used to train 2 time a week frequency for every muscle group, and now it's essentially just 1 time, except for hamstrings. But from going to that, I will say like 1 time a week frequency absolutely destroys me. I mean, I am sore for probably longer than I should be. So training with 1 time a week frequency has definitely led to more muscular soreness. And they say like after, what is it, like 48 hours, then muscle protein synthesis is like, it's over and you can go ahead and train the muscle again. But I'm not going to change anything just because I have seen such good results from it. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. I was, so again, it kind of sounds like it slowed down a little bit, and now you're doing 1 time frequency. But again, I would assume that you're kind of, would you say that the extra soreness that you are experiencing now, is that just from like doing more volume in 1 session, or do you think it's because you have higher quality like per set now at this point for each muscle group?
I think it's a combination of both. Yeah. Yep. I'm definitely like, right now I'm like doing like, and nobody has to do this like top set, back off set. You could just do like two sets to 0 RAR and call that like 2 top sets. But it definitely makes me have to be more accurate with my training. And I like that a lot. I like having this pressure on me to perform, rather than being like, okay, you got 4 sets, like you got 4 opportunities to do good. So yeah.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, it's like it's kind of all on the line there with that, and for you that works best. So you did say you do top sets and down sets. So maybe explain that a little bit more. I know that's a little bit different than like straight sets. So I'm just kind of curious to hear about that and kind of the rationale behind that.
Yeah, the top sets are generally going to be in like the 5 to 10 rep range. And then I will do a back off set that is like 20% of a decrease. Doesn't have to be 20%, but usually that'll go back to like a 10 to 15 rep range. So I love training in like the 5 to 10. I love training a little bit in the heavier rep ranges. But it takes a lot to recover from. So, not having just 2 in the 5 to 10, just doing a back off can provide less stress on the connective tissue as well. And then I also just, again, like that top set being like this thing I get kind of amped up for, I have to perform for, kind of reminds me of competing in sports back in the day. And one thing I have been doing for my top set back off set, which I've loved doing this, is like my top set, I will make this like very slow, very controlled, paused in the lengthened position, only doing, in the 5 to 10. And then when I back off, I'll do more like a like faster tempo, no pauses in the lengthened, more continuous reps, more of, I guess, like the bodybuilding type of set. So I actually really like doing that. It's pretty fun.
Yeah. And with that, do you find, I guess in that down set, then you don't really try to hit it. I mean, obviously the reps are probably going to end up falling in like the same type of spot there, but I'm assuming you're not like, hey, this is kind of the rep range that I'm working in. It's just, I'm just trying to make sure I go, fairly close to muscular failure on that set.
Yep. Yep.
Gotcha. Yeah. So just because I was going to ask, kind of the typical rep range you work in, but it sounds like 5 to 10, and then really wherever that kind of that down set falls, that's where you're going to. That's just where it's going to fall. And I guess the pro of that again is you're just going to be able to get higher quality, higher intensity kind of work in a shorter amount of time, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah. And I used to do like a bit of like power building stuff too.
Yeah.
So I definitely like that like 5-ish rep range. And for a while I got very much away from that and was doing like 8+. And I just find it so not engaging enough. Like for example, doing a set of 20 on a leg press. It's like, first 14, 15 reps are just kind of like, ugh. And then I can get away with like having maybe less than optimal form, because that load isn't kind of giving me signals of if I'm doing it right. If you're doing something right or if you're doing something wrong with lightweight, probably gonna be fine. If you're doing something wrong with heavyweight,
You're going to know.
you'll know. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, you'll know right away there with it. So what do you find you ends up kind of being the average amount of sets that you do per muscle group? Is it end up just being 2, or is it a little bit more than that?
Average sets per week per muscle group would probably be in the range of 6 to 10, 6 to 8, I would say. Yeah.
Is that kind of where it's always been, or I know I'm assuming that's down from what it used to be at one point.
Yeah. So when I was doing the Renaissance periodization stuff, I was doing almost 20 sets per muscle per week. At the end to like week 4. Yeah, it's definitely been reduced since then.
Yeah. What about so like kind of how does your deloads work? Is that something where you just auto regulate that? And how often does that kind of end up happening for you?
So deloads for me, I have found I have to have a deload every like 6 to 7 weeks.
Yeah.
Let's see, maybe 2 years ago, I worked with AJ Morris, and he does like the D volumes. So he doesn't I would very much like pre-plan my deloads every 4 or 5 weeks. And so once I started working with him, we did not plan a deload, and it ended up being like 8 straight weeks of training to 0 RIR. And then on that 8th week, I had to deload for like 2.5 weeks after that.
Wow.
So 6 weeks, 7 weeks is like my cutoff. And then I kind of run it 2 different ways. Like if I'm feeling really good when I deload, which isn't typical, then I will do a D volume where I'm just doing like one top set on everything, still trying to progress, but it's probably not going to progress very well. And then if I'm feeling like pretty beat up, like I need a mental break as well, like I'm going deload and I'm just reducing reps, reducing sets, reducing load, and just recovery as the stimulus for the week.
Yeah. So again, it still sounds like it's pretty auto-regulated there, but at the end of the day, it's still it ends up being, like you said, like every 6 to 7 weeks or so. I actually had AJ on a couple episodes ago, and we were talking about his training style. His is very, intensity based. I feel like lower training volume. Do you feel like you kind of picked up some of the stuff there from that as well too?
Yeah, yeah. And then also the guy I'm working with now, Jack Piad. I don't know if you're familiar with him or
Mm-mm.
not, but I think he worked with AJ as well. And
Okay.
it's just very, you know, you got one or two top sets and you're training all the way to failure. So
Is this kind of a approach that you would like have your clients take as well, or do you kind of switch it up a little bit more? So somebody that's, not as advanced as you, somebody that is just trying to build a little bit of muscle, look better, things like that. Is this still kind of the uh approach you take, or does it change a little bit there with that?
definitely would change. Yeah. I probably would not have like an intermediate going to failure all the time. I'd probably ramp their RIR. That way they can focus on like really good technique the first couple of weeks and then maybe push the limits and see what they're capable of on the last week. And then I'd probably have a little bit more frequency in there for them so that they can learn those movement patterns if they're, not too far into their journey. So yeah, I would say like I have one client, Spencer, he does natural bodybuilding and he's been training for like 15, 16 years. So he's on something very similar to me, lower volume training to failure 3 to 4 times a week. So
Yeah, because I don't think that this approach is necessarily for everybody, right? I definitely think it's a skill, and it's definitely something that you need to get to. Like you need to get to this point at some point, right? Like you don't want to be new into training and like really pushing those top sets, and like you said, going to failure. You need to, because it's a skill, right? I feel like all this stuff is it's skill based, and like people don't think of it that way, but it is actually skill based, and it takes some time to get this dialed in. Especially like when people ask like how much volume they need to do, it's like, God, there's so many things that freaking go into that.
yeah, yeah. And I will even say like at times it feels like this training program is not for me, just because there's times where I'm like, man, I don't want to perform today. I'd rather go in and do, 3 sets of 10 at 2 RIR. So I will say, yeah, that even for me running this for a couple of months, there's times where I just don't feel like I feel like doing it.
That might be a good thing to hit on too. Kind of the pros and cons of like each kind of approach that you've taken. Where you've done the higher training volume stuff, and now the lower volume. Is there, what would be the pros and cons really of each, like for you that you've kind of noticed from doing both?
Yeah, I would say the low volume programming can teach you how to be very intense and attack each set. So that aspect of low volume training I really like. The high volume training, like the Renaissance periodization stuff I had done. I think and don't get me wrong, I made great progress on the high volume. I made great progress on the low volume. So I'm not like one of those people that sits in a camp and shoots arrows at the other camp. But I think the high volume training can also be better for like beginners or intermediates because you do have more opportunity to practice your skill at those movement patterns. But something that I've just thought about in my head a few times is training to failure definitely can burn you out. Doing this low volume thing where you do have to perform constantly. So I have thought about like doing periods where, okay, I just add a little bit of volume and then I drop back to 2 RIR, and then just do that maybe for a couple of months before I get back into the low volume, high intensity stuff. Yeah.
So I guess doing both approaches too, and somebody's thinking like, what would you say then at the end of the day are the most like important things that you need to progress, right? Because like there's, like you said, you could go back to this higher volume approach again. There's pros and cons of that. You could stay here with the kind of lower volume, higher intensity approach. There's pros and cons to that one too. Taking both of those, like at the end of the day, what do you think are the most like kind of important variables for building muscle?
I would have to say, do what you enjoy. 100% do what you enjoy. Don't let what people on the internet say deter you from doing what you can adhere best to. And then don't constantly change things. I think sticking to a plan, assessing and seeing how things develop based on what you're currently doing has a lot of value. And then changing things after you have had those assessments. So I would say those two things. Yeah.
No, I like that. I think because, at the end of the day, with, that like, there's obviously things that you need to do training wise to build muscle. But at the end of the day, like, there's a lot of there's a lot of variability that goes within it. Like I feel like hypertrophy is very forgiving in like terms of like exercise selection, rep range, intensity of training, right? Now there's obviously some things that you do need there. Like you can't be 10 reps away from failure all the time. But given that, like there is a lot of variability there. So really what it sounds like, what you said there was, at the end of the day, do something that you're actually going to stick with, right? And that you enjoy. Because if you hate doing it, the chances of you sticking with it are less likely. And really, at the end of the day, when it comes to building muscle, I feel like you obviously, you need to push yourself, but you need time too, right? Like you just need time and consistency of doing it in order to like actually see results, right? I feel like that's where a lot of people kind of get hung up with like building muscle is it's just a freaking slow process. It takes forever. And if you're trying to rush that process or like, you're just not going to notice this massive like transformation in like a month, right? If you were that person, like there probably are people that can do that. But if you were that person, you wouldn't be kind of seeking the answers, right? Because you would know already if you were that person.
Yeah.
So I guess kind of I still want to talk about you kind of your nutrition and your thoughts there on that, but a couple other things here on the training side of things. So your thoughts on like warm up sets. Do you kind of count warm up sets towards your volume, or what's kind of your approach there with that? Like obviously you have two sets, you have a top set, so I would imagine you work up to it. So I'm curious to kind of hear that.
Yeah. I do spend probably 5 to 10 minutes doing like warm up drills. I know in the hypertrophy space right now, like, people like to crap on, warm up drills and stuff like that. But, I'll do some cars. If you're familiar with cars, controlled articular rotations. I'll do some positional breath work as well. And then when I'm going up to a top set, I will essentially just do like acclimation sets, and just descend my reps. So, if let's just say I'm going up to 4 plates on the pendulum, I might do no weight for 10 reps, a plate for 8 reps, 2 plates for 6 reps, 3 plates for maybe 4 reps, 3.5 plates for maybe 2. And then maybe I'll do something very close to the 4 plates for 1, and then hop into my top set, just to get tons of blood flow, practice the movement, and not create or generate any fatigue. I know some people will do some like acclimation sets where they might go like up to, let's just say, 3 RIR, then they'll do another one at 2 RIR, and then they have like their top set where they go to failure. But when I have done that, I generally notice a big decrease in my performance on my top set, and just generally like doing the top set.
Yeah. So obviously I feel like your sports background is kind of shown there with like making sure you do some stuff beforehand. Which I agree. I definitely, people do kind of crap on like doing like mobility type stuff beforehand. But again, if that makes you feel better, like just like we talked about with what style training to do, it's like if you like it and you feel like it makes it you stick to things better and you feel better, like by all means go ahead and do that, right? That's ultimately your choice there with that. And then as far as the warm-up sets go, so you're staying like far away from failure on these. You're not doing anything super close to failure or anything, but there are some people that will kind of like be a little bit closer to failure. Would that be a little bit more like kind of the training style of like you're working up to that top set, you get to that top set, and then you kind of come back down. So like kind of like a pyramid, basically, in a way. Is that kind of the how some people will approach that?
I think some people will, but I think Cassim, like his favorite way to do things would be like a 3 RIR, a 2 RIR, and then like a 0 to 1 RIR over subsequent sets. But I'm not sure if he goes back down or not. But yeah.
Because that would kind of be your stuff, right? Where like if you did do that, if you went closer failure, it would be coming up, and then you get to your top set, and then you do your down set as well too. But you said for yourself, you just are staying far away from failure on those warm up sets, and really just kind of getting yourself ready for that top set. You said you've done the higher intensity warm up sets, but I'm just like you said, affected kind of your top set and whatnot later on.
Yeah. Yeah, I used to do this like pyramiding that was called a UD workout, the University of Dayton. And it was just like a set of 12, a set of 10, a set of 8, a set of 6, a set of 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. I did that for like 3 years straight. Yeah, it's a lot.
It's kind of crazy to look back at some of the like programs and stuff that like you did when you were younger. I don't know if you ever saw like the Muscle Farm like workouts. Like I looked at one of the like it was like back attack or something, and I'm just like, damn, this freaking volume in here is insane. It's pretty crazy to
Could you
see that
imagine
stuff.
trying to do that now?
No, no. Like you said, he ended up being burnt. I would be sore for days, and I wouldn't even be able to finish it. There'd be a lot of jump volume in there.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
what about any like intensity type techniques? Is that something that you typically will throw into your programming or anything like that? I'm thinking, like rest pause type sets, partial stuff like that. Is that anything that you kind of mess around with?
I will mess around with partials towards the very end of programming. Like, if I foresee a deload, okay, I'm going to go ahead and do maybe some partials on something like a pull up, a pull down, mainly for back stuff. But to be completely honest, for myself, the biggest focus is staying pain free, injury free. So training to failure is hard enough for me. It's hard enough for me to recover from it. So I don't do a whole lot of like partials, rest pause stuff. If I do any like rest pause or giant sets or whatever we want to call them, it'll just be for a very short period of time. And since I have done this more low volume stuff, I actually have not messed around with that. But in the past, I would generally do like two blocks of hypertrophy and then one block of like metabolic stuff with those techniques in there, which shout out to N1 for all of the different metabolic techniques now. It's crazy. You can just wreck your face with those things.
Yep. What about for clients? Is that something that you would program for them at all or anything like that? Like obviously with your lower volume approach, you haven't really used it, but clients or somebody that maybe has a little bit of a higher volume approach or less intense type approach.
Yeah, I'll do that first block of hypertrophy, that second block of hypertrophy, and then
Okay.
the third one I will have clients do like, giant sets, maybe some tempo drop sets, maybe more of the metabolic stuff, and then have them feed into maybe a lower volume like resensitization phase after that before they start their hypertrophy again.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, that's very similar to how I've programmed in the past there. And then you kind of talked about you did a mini cut. You're going to be cutting here at some point. Do you think your approach will change during that period of time?
Approach to dieting or approach to training?
Approach to training. Like, do you think your approach to training will change when you get into a deficit? Like, do you think it will alter how you go about it or anything like that?
I think when I first get into a deficit, I don't think it'll change a whole lot. But maybe when I get further and further into a deficit, body fat levels come down, leverages change, then maybe I won't be training to complete failure on specific movements. Maybe like, lateral raises and bicep curls and stuff like that. I'll train to failure, but maybe on the pendulum squat and the RDL, I'll probably play it a little safer. So I'm not sure how that'll look yet, but if I am dialing it back quite a bit, I'm not sure if I'll need to add another set or not, but we shall see.
Yeah. So TBD on that, and like basically you're just trying to intensity might be something that comes down on the more compound movements, basically when you're in that deficit. Yeah, that makes sense. Cool. So let's kind of chat about the nutrition side of things. So you said you just did a mini cut, and now you're back into gaining. So I'm curious, how do you kind of go about your gaining phases? Do you uh, focus on like, do you track calories, macros? Do you focus on like a certain amount of weight gain, like per week? Or yeah, I'm curious to hear about that.
Yeah, I generally do the recommendations of like 1 to 2% of your total body weight gained per week. That was going pretty well until the holidays, and then the holidays hit, and ended up gaining like 7 pounds in a week. You know how that goes. But as far as gaining does go, I mean, I'm pretty lenient with myself. You know, when I'm in a deficit, I'm tracking absolutely everything. I'm weighing all of my food, being very meticulous with it. And then once I go into more of a gaining phase, I like to live my life a little bit more. I'm not going to live my life via food scale. So I do allow myself to estimate foods here and there. If I'm hungry, I'm going to uh, overeat. I'm going to overeat regardless of what my macronutrients say. And then I do still track everything. Like even if I grab like a cinnamon sugar cookie, I'm still just going to go on my Fitness Pal, type in cinnamon sugar cookie, find something remotely close, plug it in. And then that way I have that data going forward. And then I like to, I'm sure you're familiar with 3DMJ guys, Alberto Nunez and all that, but love the fact that, you know, his last contest prep, he
Yeah.
essentially didn't weigh anything, didn't track anything. And I took a lot of inspiration from that because in the past I have type A personality, all consuming OCD with this stuff. So, you know, I think hearing him, somebody, a veteran in the sport, talk about that stuff, and then trying to implement it myself and using really like the body weight scale as my biggest guide.
And so it sounds like you do a little bit more, like you still do track like during your building phases, but it's a little less, it's not as like in depth as it would be like during a fat loss phase. You're going to give yourself a little bit more like flexibility there with that, but really you're just going off of body weight and just kind of checking that. I don't know how you feel. I find that I did previous like bulking building phases where I just kind of just try to gain weight, and I, you know, probably gained a little bit too much weight doing that. And then my one I did about a year ago, I was a little bit more diligent with like tracking and things like that, and just I guess weighing out a little bit more. And I definitely gained weight again, but it definitely was helpful to make sure that I was eating enough regularly. But now this time around, I started out tracking a little bit more, and then you know how it is, man. It's like you just do it all the time, and it just gets a little, it's like, man, I just need a break from doing this, right? So I've been trying to go with a little bit more of an intuitive approach. What do you think are the like kind of pros and cons there of kind of taking that approach where it is a little bit more intuitive, like during a bulking phase?
Well, I would say it depends on the individual and how comfortable they are with gaining body fat too. Like if somebody is very resistant against gaining body fat, like I have a female client, then maybe we'll pay a little bit more attention to how we're tracking our food and what we're eating. But like myself, like if I gain some extra body fat, I'll probably just get a little stronger and wear some bigger t-shirts. But I would say, I mean, some clients definitely slack on the protein when they're doing more of the intuitive eating side of things. So I would just have to say like just a big prioritization around protein timing, spacing it out adequately throughout your day. And then on top of that, making sure just your digestion's on point
Yeah.
when you're in a gaining phase. And then that's where, in my opinion, like listening to your body becomes the biggest thing. Cause it's like, okay, if I have 700 grams of carbs to eat and I wake up and my stomach's a little off, I don't know if it's the best idea to shovel down 700 grams of carbs, which I was guilty of doing that in the past, and it would backfire, pun intended.
So it sounds like for you then, like I agree. I think listening to your body is key. I think you need to, there's also that fine line there where it's like, you know, if you want to obviously change your body weight and manipulate it one way or the other, you do kind of have to push yourself a little bit. So is that something where in your phases you do potentially like, I guess, what's kind of your game plan there with that? Like, do you just kind of like, I guess, again, that probably just comes with time and skill and figuring that out. But do you listen to your body at that point? Or do you think you also need to kind of push through it? Because, you know, some people I feel like, oh, I'm a hard gainer, I can't gain any weight. But then it's like, well, you just don't eat enough regularly, right, to gain weight. So it's like, you know, kind of, I guess, what's your thought process
Yeah. Yeah, I would say, like you said, it's a fine line. You know, if you wake up and your stomach's feeling a little off, maybe just don't push food that day. Ease back into eating more over time, but definitely have to fuel your performance in the gym. I think that's a huge thing that a lot of people miss out on is actually eating enough food and eating enough food where you are digesting it appropriately. I get into a bad habit when I'm in a gaining phase where I'm not hungry in the mornings, I'm not hungry in the afternoons, and then the evenings roll around and I'm just
Starving.
like ravenous, and I end up eating like 70% of my calories in the evening, and then I'm in this vicious cycle of like waking up not hungry prior to my training sessions. So I think the biggest thing for me has been, and I've never done this in the past, but like prepping meals, as boring as it is, and just having these smaller meals prepped out throughout my day so that I can, when I'm busy, I can just grab it, eat it, make sure I get in a protein serving, and prioritize my digestion across the entire day.
Yeah, I find that like when it comes to these bulking phases and whatnot, it's like I feel like you need to make sure you kind of limit this like up and down with it, right? And what I mean by that is like kind of like you said there, where it's like you have, you know, if you break it down in within a day, it's like you don't eat a lot at one point, but then you eat a ton, and then like same thing if you kind of zoom out and like look on a week to week time scale. It's like I think you want to be careful with having like really high days, really low you know what I mean? It's like kind of being a little bit more even with it from day to day, which can be a challenge, right? But I agree. I think that obviously if you're at the point where you feel like you have to force feed yourself, probably time to take like a mini cut potentially, or look into other things as well too. I'm assuming that's probably what you do then at that point, where it's like if you are consistently at that point where you feel like you can't eat anymore, then you potentially take a mini cut, or maybe even in the bulking phase altogether.
Yeah. If appetite starts to down regulate, typically I will just start gravitating more towards these really tasty foods, just so much easier to get
Yep.
down. I was working with I think it was Alan Kress for a while there, and we were pushing calories up to, I think carbohydrates were over 700. So picking up some tricks from him that were like easy digestible meals, like pomegranate juice mixed with protein powder, mixed with like a tapioca starch maltodextrin, mixed with like a almond butter, and then waking up and just downing that, getting 1,000 calories in. That was a huge help. But yeah, definitely like changing the food sources that you're
Yeah.
consuming. Make sure that you're not having 70 grams of fiber, and definitely will implement some mini cuts along the way.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I do think that's a big mistake people make in these bulking phases too, is like you said, they just try to keep food quality like super high. And it's like, you don't need to do that when you can, I guess people are like, oh, I'm going to do a clean bulk or a dirty bulk. And it's like, I think people just, I don't know. I guess their thought process on that is, you have to eat all clean foods, right? But like, to me, a clean bulk is like, you just don't go crazy with it and just gain a bunch of weight super quickly. Right.
Yeah.
But it's crazy. Like I've definitely talked to people that they just don't realize that that's something that you can do, is just, kind of lower your food quality. And like you said, go a little bit more calorie dense. It's basically the opposite of what you would tell somebody that's like deep into a fat loss phase. It's like, we want to find ways to get easy calories. And like you said, drinking them is going to be helpful. As far as like tracking body weight, do you find that, because I think that's a very good way to go about it when you're like losing body fat. But what I find, and this is just me personally, I feel like it's a little bit tougher to track it, right? Because we want to look at like the averages and see where that's trending. But I also feel like from day to day, I don't know if you notice this in yourself. It's like, I just feel like there's a lot more like fluctuations with body weight in a bulking phase than there is in like a fat loss phase. So what's kind of your approach there with that? What do you kind of look at there with that?
I generally just use weekly averages just to make sure that things are moving. But yeah, there's definitely way more fluctuations when in a surplus, just because of food volume in your stomach, stool, glycogen being completely tapped out. And if you undereat, which, when you have 600, 700 grams of carbohydrates, it's pretty easy to undereat. So then it's like, if like the other day I stepped on the scale, I was 189 pounds. And then 2 days ago had some undereating, busy day, super active, low on carbs a little bit, and then woke up the next day at like 183. And then I feel fat, but I'm also like real flat.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
That's
yeah, generally just look at the averages for the weeks. And yeah.
so in that scenario, then, you saw that, you're 189 one day, 183. Do you change anything up on that day, or do you just kind of go as normal with business and don't really change anything up?
Yeah, I will look and see what my carbohydrates were the day prior and then try to eat them back. Um, but some days I just can't. So usually I will just start to see that body weight climb back up. But yeah, that's actually what I did during the deficit too, during my mini cut. I tried to approach it a little bit more along the lines of how Nunez did with his
Yep.
contest prep. It's just like using the scale as my guide, like, and then also using my Aura ring too, because some days I'll have like 16, 17,000 steps, and it's like, man, I don't think I need to stick to my nutrition this closely. Maybe I can have a little leeway due to that.
Yeah, I love like tracking steps and activity. I think that can just be super helpful there. And as somebody that works in person still with clients, you definitely steps are probably a lot easier. That was for me, that was a huge kind of lifestyle change, was like going from training in person to just being, online. It's like, damn, I mean, just the amount of less activity that you get is pretty crazy. And not being aware of that, I could see where a lot of people, they go from a more higher activity job to lower. It's like, man, that can really make a massive difference there.
Yeah, when I was down in Cincinnati, I was training. I was training like 40 hours a week, and I would get like 20,000 steps on average. I could not bring my body weight over like 175. And then once I transitioned to mainly online, uh, I gained weight like that. So
It really does make a big difference. So I guess then at that point, do you have like a certain body weight that you try to hit and then you end it, or again, are you just kind of looking at like uh, hunger, stuff like that, training performance in terms of like when to end your building phase, or do you kind of just wait until you maybe you have it pre-planned out and it's like, hey, this is going to be when it's done?
yeah, in the past, every time that I would bulk, I would get up to like a 190 range. The last serious bulk I did, I got up to 196. So I'm really looking for that body weight again.
Yeah.
And then I'll compare those photos to the last time I was that body weight. But um, to be completely transparent, I mean, I was pretty much this body weight in high school. So I'm kind of curious to push my body weight up to like 200 plus. I've just never done that, and would just be kind of curious to see how I'd respond to it.
You think that's
But
something you'll do this go around, or
yeah, I do think so. Yeah, I think probably by August, I'm looking to be in that 200 range.
what do you go maybe a little bit more off of like kind of what your average is for like the month rather than like week to week? Because I find that can be, just like we talked about, that can be a little bit more helpful to make sure you're on the right track there. Looking more like kind of where your weight's going on average and like a month standpoint.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I find that can just be a little bit, because again, like we said, there's kind of those up and downs there with it from day to day that can kind of mask what's going on. So is there anything else that you're looking for specifically during your like gaining phases to, and I've said gaining, building, bulking, all kind of the same type of thing here, but is there anything that you're looking for specifically within these to like know, hey, build a muscle, or is it just kind of like just trusting the process?
really just trusting the process. To be honest, I don't do measurements. I don't know how you are with that, but like measurements are one of those things that there's so much operator error,
Yep.
and I don't want to take a measurement of my chest and it be 0.25 less than last month and then be like in my head about it. Um, I used to have access to an in-body, one of those like bioelectric impedance machines, you stand on, and uh, I used that for a couple of months when I was in Cincinnati, and it was just one of those mind fucks again. I mean, it was just one of those things. It's like, oh, I gained 10 pounds. I lost 3 pounds of muscle. How did that happen? So I generally just use like body weight and then training performance, and then also progress photos.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, there's, people want kind of this like hard number of like, oh, am I building muscle? But I just tell them, you kind of have to, if you're like, you just kind of have to trust the process almost in a way, which kind of sucks, but it is what it is. Cause you can't really, once you kind of check off the basics, it's like, obviously we can continue to individualize your training and whatnot, but it's like after that, it's like, you just kind of have to be patient and trust the process, unfortunately, which freaking sucks, but that's the best we have, right? And so I agree. I mean, training performance, making sure if that weight is trending up over time and you're getting stronger and whatnot, like there's a very good chance that you're, building muscle in the process. Do you have clients that kind of have a tough time during this period of time too? Because I think, and maybe even yourself too, and I've been there where like you're gaining weight. So you are gaining a little bit of body fat, unfortunately. And so like your overall look, like, yeah, maybe you look bigger in like shirts and stuff like that, but your actual like you look at yourself and you sometimes even look like smaller almost in a way. And like, you don't look as big, right? Do you find that that's normal? And like, maybe what's kind of your thought process through that?
Yeah, it's interesting because when you finish a deficit, you're a little bit leaner. Then you start adding food back in. You're like, oh, I can't wait to bulk. I can't wait to eat again. And then everything fills out. Your glycogen
Yep.
stores fill out. You start getting stronger. You're sleeping better. Everything's flowing. Things feel really good. So uh, then you fast forward down the line a couple of months, and well, now instead of being lean and filled out, well, now you've put on some body fat. You're filled out, but your body fat's kind of masking how full you are. So I will say like 2014, I did my first natural bodybuilding competition and got down to like 157 pounds. Very, very, very lean, probably over dieted for the show. And that, I will say, forever changed my perspective around body composition.
Yeah.
So then when I got my body weight back up to where it was before, I was like, man, I'm super fat. So I will say that definitely changed my perspective on body comp. But I will say, like, once you get to that point of your bulk where you start to lose your shreds, your definition, the vascularity, what I do personally is I just solely focus on gym performance. I stop focusing so much on my physique. It does become more challenging to take progress photos because it's not very motivating. It's demotivating, really. But I just changed my perspective. I'm like, okay, well, performance. I'm an athlete now, and I just get bigger t-shirts.
Yeah, bigger. I love because the t-shirt part's it's always nice to fill out your t-shirts, but then you take that shirt off and it's like when you're cutting, you wear maybe your sleeveless shirts a little bit more, walk around with your shirt off a little bit more, then you get in the building phase or bulking phase, and it's like, all right, t-shirt on, but I can fill this out better. I look bigger. But I just bring that up because I have a couple clients going through this right now, and it seems like kind of pretty regular, especially one client where it's just like he's seeing his weight go up and whatnot. And it's just, kind of always, I feel like that's why having a coach like during this period of time can be so helpful, because I think that's where probably most people end up not really ever making a change with their body, right? Because they kind of see this like, hey, I'm working hard, I'm doing all these things, but my body composition is getting worse. And I think like when you're in the moment, it's like, oh, I'm never going to be able to get back to where I was. But it's like, that's why I think it's so important to have a coach during this time to kind of talk you through this and be like, hey, this is okay. This is part of the process. Because I feel like if you never do this, or again, I'm not saying you have to get like super fat or anything like that, but or had a ton of body fat, but it's like if you never spend some time, or maybe your physique isn't necessarily the greatest it's at, but you're gaining a little bit of weight, like that's going to do more wonders for your physique long term than just trying to stay your leanest or anything like that all the time.
Yeah, 100%. I recently listened to the Revive Stronger podcast with Scott Stevenson.
Yep.
And they had talked about something that I've experienced a few times where like you do gain an excessive amount of body fat in a shorter period of time. Your training performance is fantastic though. And then once you maintain that higher body fat, like over the course of months, you start to see this recomposition effect. So I feel like a lot of people will get to that point and they're like, okay, I got to diet. And then they diet and then they never get the benefit of achieving those higher body fat levels. And I've seen this happen quite a few times over my course of training, where I just kind of rebound a little hard. Maybe I'm not very happy with how things look, but just put it all into the gym. And then a couple months roll around, I'm like, wow, like this is the most muscle that I have had. So I think just like you said, like time, patience, and just again, giving yourself enough time while in the surplus.
So it sounds like, maybe in that situation, if you are somebody who maybe you gained a little bit more than what you wanted, like worst case scenario, it's like in that situation, would you just kind of have them keep gaining weight, or would you be like, hey, let's kind of, maintain this current body weight and then just really focus on like training performance? Because obviously the calories that you have are going to be important in terms of being in that surplus, but also I think body fat levels play a big role too, where, maybe a certain body fat percentage, you're just primed to, really push training and whatnot. So would that kind of be your general approach there with it? If you maybe are somebody that went maybe overshot a little bit, just kind of maintain that and just really focus on just pushing it in the gym.
Yep. And I think I'm just referencing a lot of people here, but I think Nunez had said something along these lines where the best gym performance that you're going to have is not going to be the body composition that you like the most, something along those lines. So I always like to reiterate that to clients if they do happen to overshoot. Okay, let's just go ahead. We'll maintain where we are. And hey, it's not the worst thing in the world. Maybe you have, you got some extra body fat on you. You got maybe better leverages. So let's take advantage of that while we can.
Yeah, I've really been trying to kind of hammer this across on social lately. Is just like people just have this like just terrible perception towards like gaining weight, but it's like, I mean, the only time I feel like it's really a problem is if you do it for months on end where you're gaining super quick, like week over week. And if you're just like, your diet sucks and like you're not weight training, it's like, okay, then at that point it's like, yeah, that's different. But if you're like weight training, your weight's going up a little bit, like you're, you're getting your protein in, you're sleeping well, like you're going to be fine, at the end of the day. Like if anything, it's going to be better for you long term. So go ahead.
Yeah, and something I've also seen with people, especially in this industry, with like the hypertrophy realm, it's like people get really, really lean. And then once they start to gain body fat again, they think they're fatter than what they actually are.
Yeah, that too.
Yeah.
No, I think that's a great point. I'm glad you bring that up because, once you do get lean, it's like that's kind of your new baseline now. We're like, and so anything off that, I've definitely experienced that too. I'm sure you did after your first bodybuilding show where it's like you start to, the body fat that you're at now was at one point probably super lean for you, but because you got super lean, it's like now you feel worse off.
Yep. 100%.
Cool, man. So we're kind of coming up on time here, so I want to kind of wrap this up. Is there anything else that maybe we didn't cover today that you want to bring up, or if not, again, there's a ton of great information in here in terms of your philosophy on hypertrophy training and whatnot, and building and things like that. So if you don't have anything else you want to add, is there anywhere where you want to lead the audience to, or anything like that?
Yeah, you guys can find me on Instagram at Adam Neth, and that is Neth. And then you guys can also find me or find the Garage Gym at Lift Lab, and that is LIFTELAB. And then I do have a podcast. I don't do it a whole lot every so often, but our podcast is the Lift Lounge. So there'll be a couple episodes here and there throughout this year, but not weekly. But
cool. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, just kind of something I guess you and somebody else kind of do just for fun and whatnot whenever. Yeah. Do you have like guests on, or is it more just you two kind of just chatting it up about?
just pretty much chatting it up.
Yeah.
We have discussed putting some guests on, but just a matter of aligning these schedules to that,
Yeah. Yeah, that right. And it's not only do you have to work with the other person, but now you also have your other hosts that you have to work with too. So 3 people, it's definitely a lot more challenging. Well, cool, man. Yeah, really good chat. Really a lot of interesting stuff in here. So I'll post all that stuff in the show notes, and we'll talk to you soon.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me.